Sawadee Good morning, everyone. My name is Lilian. I'm from Help University, Malaysia. Help means Higher Education Learning Principle. So today, I would like to share with you some findings of my previous research, perceptions of English syntactic variants, a comparison between the Australians and Malaysians. You know, when English spread across the borders, you have different variety of Englishes. So, according to Kachru, a very famous social language, he actually say that there are three circles: the inner circle, the UK, Australia, Canada, and the outer circle, Malaysia, Philippines, Bangladesh, whatever, and the expanded circle. And I would like to focus more on Malaysian English, that's in the outer circle. Okay, about Malaysian English, some people have put it on a lactal continuum. So in terms of syntax, you have the acronym, the acrolect, mesolect, and then have the basilect. Because I'm doing formal written English, so I don't look at the basilect. So what is the basilect? Basilect is something that I'm pretty nervous, but I can't see the time. Is the timer on? Because I know that I only have 15 minutes. I got very nervous. Okay. So mesolect is what I'm looking at. We call it mesolect because it's not as standard as acrolect for pedagogical use. So these are some examples of mesolect. You pluralize some uncountable nouns, for example, informations, chalk, like luggages and things like that, and the list goes on. And because of limited time, I don't go through one by one. So the mesolect, we call it mesolect, that means the syntactic variants that used among Malaysians, but is not adopted as pedagogical for pedagogical purposes. So the mesolect has been accepted in various contexts by previous study, and it's actually in informal setting. It's more a form of a marker of solidarity among Malaysians. And then in education, several research studies have been done on teachers' attitude towards the mesolect, and it's found that it's quite positive. Many of them adopt that sort of usages. And in print media, a couple of these mesolect usages actually come out in the print media. And however, some researchers say that it's not for formal context. It shouldn't be used, and you will have that kind of negative impact, and then it will tarnish the image of the company or the organization. So substantial empirical examples of Malaysian English, or we call it at mesolect level, provided by researchers from more than 20 years ago, has testified that Malaysian English is in a stage of nativization. It can thus be expected that in today's Malaysian English, this feature will be commonly in use in the language of Malaysians, and that is the hypothesis. Okay, so my study actually seeks to explore teachers and employers' perception of certain syntactic variants of English, and I'm comparing the perceptions of Malaysian teachers and employers and those of the Australians and their Australian counterparts, I mean the Australian teachers and employers. And my teachers participants are teachers who teach in the university. They have at least Master of Education or Master of TESOL or TESOL, and then teaching in tertiary institution have at least 5 years of experience. And 12 teachers were actually recruited. 12 Malaysian teachers were recruited, and 11 Australian teachers were recruited. They were actually asked to assess 20 letters written by Malaysian tertiary students studying in Australia. And both group of teachers were asked to look at the grammar and also look at the vocabulary. So they found, these are the things that they found, and it's very in conjunction, it's actually in line with what we call Malaysian English at the mesolected level. So for example, no marking of past tense verbs. Some people argue that this is grammatical errors or whatever, but in my study, I call them syntactic variants because it's actually commonly used in Malaysia. No marking of present tense, no marking of plural s, individualizing those uncountable words, absence of articles, we don't use articles, use different prepositions, and redundant prepositions, omissions of prepositions. This is interesting. Omissions of pronoun object more than 30 years ago, somebody already said that some researcher already noticed that in Malaysian formal language, we always omit the eat. So I would appreciate if you could, and we always omit it. So we also, in my study, we also found this, and I'll share with you the results. Eclipses of copula, no marking of gerund, look forward to hear from you, all this found. And then look at the teachers' perceptions, the rejections. The Australian teachers and the Malaysian teacher, you can see that the rejection rate is much higher here. Oh, sorry. And then Malaysian teachers' judgment is rejection rate is very low for this sort of items, and then very high for eclipses of copula. That means, you know, your verb, you don't have the copula, you don't have maybe an. I'm talking to you, you don't have the am, that sort of things. Verb form problem. And then the Australian teachers' judgment, then you have those, their rejection to be very low on the omission of pronoun object. That means that they are very comfortable with that, but they highly rejected this no marking of past tense verb, redundant preposition and things like this. No marking of gerund, they don't like it. They highly rejected it. So the differences in judgment is more on those items that highly accepted by Malaysian but highly rejected by Australian teachers, individualizing as multiple words, redundant preposition, no marking of plurals. Those accepted by Australian teachers but rejected by Malaysian teachers is no marking of pronoun object. So both groups highly rejected no marking of past tense verb and eclipses of copula. In general, views on syntactic variants such as use of different prepositions, no preposition, no article are less consistent than views on eclipses of copula. That means people are more rejecting of this too, no marking of gerunds and eclipses of copula than, you know, different use of prepositions or omissions of prepositions. So I took what I got from the teachers' perceptions on the syntactic variants, and I put it in a questionnaire, and then I surveyed the employers. So those employers are people in, you know, specializing in recruitment, finance, investment, banking, marketing, and insurance, and engineering. And then 113 Australian employers in Melbourne were recruited, and 213 Malaysian employers in Malacca, Kuala Lumpur, everywhere in Malaysia were recruited. And then they were asked to respond to the questionnaire. And you can see that these are the rejection rates of the Australian employer and Malaysian employer. Not very high, but you can see that the Australian employers, the rejection rate is higher among them of all the items. So Malaysian judgment, employer judgment is, in sum, the methylectic usage is rejected by not more than 30% of the Malaysian employees. That means they are quite lenient. They accept it. So not more than 30%. So Malaysian employers' judgment of this item is actually concur with the Malaysian teachers' judgment. And then two preposition usage, for example, sit for and put in, identified by TAM 30 years ago, has become embedded into the English usage system in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, everybody will say, not everybody, many will say, I seek for a job, rather than I seek for a job. It's a redundant preposition, and different use of preposition, they say good in instead of good at. As for the Australian employers, the rejecting rate is not higher than 70%, but comparatively it's so much higher. I got 5 minutes, right? Comparatively is so much higher than the rejection rate among the Malaysian employer. So that means that quite a large number of Australians are tolerant of the methylated usage. However, compared with the Malaysian counterparts, Australian employers are still much more rejecting. It is also noticed that the Australian employers' judgment, similar to the teachers, are variable with respect to preposition and article. This is interesting because people are not so sure about preposition and the use of articles nowadays, including both Malaysians and Australians. They are not so sure whether they should reject it or they should accept it. So the implication for the study is for international cultural communications, and when English spread across borders and you have a variety of Englishes, and then it's very diverse and complex because every variety has its own culture embedded. So the standard of spoken English should be set, will be very different. So people have to be sensitive of the different usage in different regions. So for pedagogical implications, student learners should always try to get evidence whether this is correct or incorrect. You can Google it, or they should encourage by the teachers, and don't look at very gray area. They should make sure the teachers should make sure what they can accept and what they don't accept. And it is only by close attention to this usage this can be established. And then at the end of the day, what Gil, a very famous social linguist in Malaysia, what she's trying to say is, who is the boss, who decided? If you are in a context where these usage are accepted and you have to follow it, and who is the authority who makes the decision? That's what social linguists I mean, it's a lot of political issues involved as well. But anyhow, this is a view. So this study actually say that in Malaysia, certain usages have been in the system and actually highly accepted by teachers, employers, and certain usage in prepositions and articles, and people are still very confused, and it's a gray area. And at the end of the day, who has the right to say this is correct and this is incorrect depends on the context, and depends who has the authority. Okay, so I think I make it before time's up. So thank you everyone and have a good day. Thank you.